I never thought a casual dinner out would turn into the scariest thing I'd experience all year. But then again, you never really know where the danger is hiding. Sometimes it's not in dark alleys or abandoned buildings. Sometimes it's right there in plain sight, wearing a crisp white shirt and a friendly smile. It was supposed to be a nice night out. My best friend Sarah and I decided to try this new place downtown. Not super fancy, but nice enough that we both dressed up a bit. You know how it is. When you're paying more than $20 for pasta, you want to feel like you're getting the full experience. The waiter was cute. I'll give him that. Tall, dark hair, the kind of guy you'd notice in a crowd. He was friendly too, making small talk as he took our orders. I didn't think much of it at first. That's just how some waiters are, right? Always trying to be charming to get better tips. Sarah noticed it before I did. She kept giving me these looks across the table, these little smirks. I thought she was just being weird until she whispered that our waiter couldn't keep his eyes off me. I brushed it off. Maybe he was just being attentive to his customers. When he brought the check, Sarah decided to be her usual playful self. She told him I'd been single for 6 months, like it was some kind of joke. I wanted to die of embarrassment right there. The waiter just smiled, said something about how that was hard to believe. I thought that was the end of it. We went home after dinner. Nothing unusual happened. I live in a second-floor apartment, close enough to the ground that I can hear people talking on the street if they're loud enough. It's not the fanciest place, but it's mine, and I've always felt safe there. That night, I woke up around 3 a.m, thirsty. I got up to get some water, and as I passed my window, I saw something that made me stop. There was a man standing across the street, looking up at my building. At first, I thought I was just seeing things. It was dark, and I wasn't wearing my glasses. I went to get them, and when I looked back out the window, he was gone. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe it was just someone waiting for a ride, or a neighbor taking out their trash. I went back to bed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. A week later, I was out for my morning jog when someone called my name. I turned around, and there he was, our waiter from the restaurant. He was in running clothes, looking all sweaty and athletic. He said he recognized me from the restaurant, asked if I wanted to run together. I said sure, why not? He seemed nice enough, and it's always good to have a running buddy. We ran together for a while, talking about nothing important. He asked for my number at the end, said we should run together again sometime. I gave it to him. He was cute, and I hadn't been on a date in months. What could it hurt? We texted for about a week. At first it was normal stuff, asking about running times, making small talk, but then his messages started getting weird. He'd ask where I was, what I was doing, who I was with. I started ignoring his texts more and more. Something about him just felt off. Last Friday, I went out with some friends to a bar downtown. I told him I was visiting my parents out of town because I didn't want him to know where I was. I was having a good time, trying to forget about his weird texts, when my phone started buzzing non-stop. It was him, text after text, getting more and more aggressive. Then he sent pictures of me, in the bar, from different angles. He'd been watching me all night. He knew I was lying about being out of town. He knew exactly where I was. I felt sick. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold my phone. I showed the pictures to my friends, and we left immediately. I called the police the next morning. They found an AirTag in my purse. The little white disc had been there for who knows how long, tracking my every move. The police said he must have slipped it in there when I was dining in the restaurant where he works. They found dozens of photos on his phone too. Me at the restaurant, me jogging, me coming and going from my apartment. He'd been watching me for weeks. The worst part? He knew exactly where I lived. He'd been standing outside my window that night. He'd been following me, taking pictures, tracking my location, and I never even noticed. I moved to a different apartment last week, one on the 15th floor. I still can't sleep without checking my windows a dozen times. I can't go running without looking over my shoulder. I can't eat at restaurants without scanning the room for familiar faces. and I check my purse every time I leave a public place, looking for that white disc that could mean someone's watching. Spring break was supposed to be about freedom and adventure. That's what I told my parents when I said I was going camping with my boyfriend. They thought I was crazy for choosing the mountains over the beach, but I wanted something different, something peaceful. I never expected to find a restaurant that only existed at night, or to lose someone I loved to whatever was hiding inside that old church. Rick and I decided to break from our usual spring break routine. Instead of partying with friends, we wanted something more romantic, more peaceful. Rick grew up in West Virginia, and he always talked about how beautiful the Appalachian Mountains were. I'd never been there before, so when he suggested a camping trip, I was all for it. The mountains were breathtaking. Our campsite was secluded, about 40 minutes from the nearest town. The crisp mountain air felt different from the city smog I was used to. The first day was perfect, just exploring the area, cooking together, enjoying each other's company. At night, the sounds of wildlife surrounded us. Some of the noises were a bit unsettling, but with Rick there, I felt safe. Rick was special. He lost both his parents young and worked his way through college. He was the kind of person who made you feel like everything would be okay, no matter what. That's probably why I didn't listen to my gut when things started getting weird. The second day, we went hiking. By the time we got back to camp, we were exhausted and hungry. Our food supplies were running low, so we decided to drive into town for dinner. It was only 8 in the evening, but the town was already shutting down. We drove around for what felt like forever, looking for any place that was still open. That's when we saw it. An old church building with a party tent set up beside it. A sign hanging from the tent said, "Chinese food," in bright red letters. The lights were on, and I could see tables and chairs inside. Being part Chinese, I was excited to find something familiar, even if it wasn't going to be authentic. 2 men were working outside the church. They waved us over as we pulled into the parking lot. They weren't Chinese, which I found a bit odd, but I was too hungry to care. One of them, a tall guy with a friendly smile, explained they were in the middle of converting the old church into a proper restaurant. Said they got the building for cheap because no one wanted it, being an old church and all. They were working nights because of their day jobs, and while they renovated, they figured they might as well serve food to get their name out there. The other man, shorter and quieter, was painting the church's trim. He told us they planned to turn the altar into a bar, the pews into booths. Said it would be a unique dining experience, mixing old architecture with modern cuisine. I remember thinking it was a bit disrespectful, turning a church into a restaurant, but I kept that to myself. They seemed so excited about their plans, showing us where the kitchen would go, where they'd put the hostess stand. The tall one even joked about keeping some of the religious decorations, said it would add character to the place. The food wasn't great, but it filled us up. The soup was decent, but the beef and broccoli and sweet and sour chicken tasted like they came from a frozen dinner. Still, we left happy, thinking we'd found a new spot for dinner during our stay. The next day, we decided to take it easy. We slept in and headed to town for lunch. After eating at a burger place, curiosity got the better of us. We drove back to where the Chinese restaurant had been, just to see what it looked like during the day. What we found made my blood run cold. The church was abandoned, its walls covered in peeling paint and dirt. There was no tent, no tables, no sign of any renovation work. The grass where the tent had been was long and undisturbed, like nothing had ever been there. I felt a knot forming in my stomach as we got out of the car to investigate. The church door opened with a loud creak. Inside, dust covered everything. The pews were broken, the walls were crumbling, and graffiti covered every surface. One message in red paint caught my eye. "The beast is here." The air was thick with dust and something else, a strange smell that made me gag. I found the source under one of the pews, a huge black rat, headless and rotting. I ran outside and threw up. I begged Rick to leave, but he was curious. That night, as we drove back from dinner, we saw the restaurant again. The tent was back, the lights were on, and the two men were working outside. Rick wanted to investigate, but something felt wrong. The way the men smiled at us, the way the tent seemed to glow in the darkness, the way the church looked different at night. Everything set off alarm bells in my head. Rick thought I was being paranoid. He said he just wanted to talk to the men, figure out what was going on. I followed him to the tent, my heart pounding. The men greeted us like old friends, offering us menus. I felt sick looking at the food options, wondering what kind of meat they were using. When Rick started asking questions about the building, I couldn't take it anymore. I ran to the car, feeling like I was going to throw up again. When I turned around, my heart stopped. The tent had vanished into thin air, leaving only trampled grass where it had stood moments before. The tables, chairs, and all signs of the makeshift restaurant were gone, as if they'd never existed. But worst of all, Rick was nowhere to be seen. The spot where he'd been standing just seconds ago was empty, the darkness seeming to swallow everything. "Rick!" I screamed his name until my throat was raw. My voice echoed off the church walls, bouncing back at me mockingly in the night air. Nothing but silence answered. The crickets had even stopped chirping, leaving an unnatural stillness that made my skin crawl. I fumbled with my phone, hands shaking so badly I could barely turn on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, casting long shadows that seemed to move and twist. I ran around the perimeter of the church, my feet crunching on dead leaves and broken glass. The light bounced wildly as I moved, illuminating nothing but crumbling walls and overgrown weeds. No footprints, no signs of struggle, no evidence that anyone had been there at all. The police arrived within 15 minutes, but I could tell from their faces they didn't believe a word I said. Two young officers exchanged knowing looks as I desperately tried to explain about the tent, the men, the restaurant that appeared only at night. They swept their flashlights across the church grounds, pointing out the undisturbed dust, the cobwebs in the doorway, the lack of any recent activity. "Listen, miss," the older officer said, his tone condescending. "We get calls about this place all the time. Kids come up here to party, do drugs, mess around. Whatever you took tonight, it made you see things that weren't there. This building's been abandoned for years." I tried to protest, to make them understand, but they just shook their heads. One of them muttered something about college kids and bad trips into his radio. They didn't even bother to take a proper report, just strongly suggested I go home and sleep it off. It's been almost a year now. Rick is still missing. The police never found any evidence that he was even there. I failed 2 classes last semester because I couldn't focus. I keep having nightmares about that church, about the restaurant, about the way those men smiled at us. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, thinking I hear Rick calling my name. I still drive past that church sometimes, hoping to see the tent again, hoping to find Rick. But there's never anything there except the old building, its windows dark and empty, its walls covered in graffiti, and that message in red paint. The beast is here. I've worked at this sandwich shop for 4 years now. Not the most exciting job, but it pays the bills. And honestly, I've made some good friends here. Everyone who works in food service has their share of crazy customer stories. My friend at McDonald's almost got tasered once through the drive-thru window. But apart from one robbery attempt and the usual drunk customers, I never had much of a story to tell. Until last Tuesday. I'd been there since 6:30 that morning, counting down the hours until my shift ended at 5. Around 3:30, Sarah, the other girl working with me, started feeling really sick. I told her to go home. We weren't supposed to work alone, but the place was dead, and I figured I could handle it for the last hour and a half. The bell chimed around 4. Just one customer, this older guy with thick glasses and thinning dark hair. I put on my best customer service voice, asked how he was doing. He barely looked up, just mumbled, "Fine," and started studying the menu board like he was trying to memorize it. I've made thousands of sandwiches, but I've never seen anyone take so long to decide. Each choice seemed to require deep thought. What kind of bread? 5 minutes of consideration. Cheese? Another 5. It was like he was trying to get everything exactly right. While his sub was in the toaster, I tried making conversation to fill the silence. Asked how his day was going. He said it was one of the worst days of his life. Just like that. Something in his voice made me want to help, so I started telling him about my terrible day before, dropping a box of chicken on my head at work, shattering my phone screen, getting on the wrong bus, being locked out in the rain. He started laughing. Not just a polite chuckle, but real laughter. Tears running down his face kind of laughter. It seemed like too much for such a stupid story, but it felt good to see him happy, even just for a moment. He ate his sandwich slowly, like he was savoring every bite. Then he came up and asked to borrow a pen, wrote something on a napkin at his table. When he brought the pen back, he handed me the folded napkin too, made me promise not to read it until he was gone. That's when things got strange. He walked out onto the highway in front of the store, just walked out there. Cars swerving around him. He stood on the median strip, staring down the road. Then he turned and waved at me. He was smiling, really smiling, like whatever he was about to do was the most natural thing in the world. I won't describe what happened next. The sounds were worse than the sight. I've tried to forget both. The napkin is still in my dresser drawer. I've only read it once. I can still see every word. It says, "Today I decided that it is going to be my last day on this earth. It wouldn't be so horrid if my beautiful wife and daughter were still alive, but they're not. And today is the 1-year anniversary of their deaths. 1 year since that drunk driver crashed into them. They didn't deserve to die that night, but they did. Since then, I'm not the same person. I'm just a shell of my former self. I didn't think I had any positivity left in my life, in my soul, until today. Until today, I hadn't laughed, or smiled for that matter, in a year. But you achieved the impossible. You made a sad old man cry tears of happiness. I wanted to thank you for that. You have put me on cloud 9 and made me realize that life isn't all that bad, but this is truly what I want. I need to be with my daughter and my wife, and that is just what I'm going to do. So again, thank you for giving me something to smile about at the end." I still have his napkin. I think about throwing it away sometimes, but I can't. It feels wrong somehow, like I'd be erasing the only proof that he existed. That he sat in my shop one Tuesday afternoon, ate his last meal, and for just a moment found something to laugh about. So I keep it, tucked away in my drawer. A reminder that sometimes the scariest things aren't monsters or ghosts. Sometimes they're just regular moments that turn into something else. And sometimes, the most haunting thing isn't what you see. It's just the memory of someone's last laugh.